Right now, we want to move on to talk a little bit about the WGA, the Writers Guild of America strike. It's ended, but auto workers, along with actors from SAG-AFTRA and other unions, remain on strike in a summer that has been full of labor unrest.
Local labor leaders say they see this as a possible tipping point, the beginning perhaps of union growth after years of decline. Scott Slauson of UE 506, which recently settled its dispute with Wabtec, says a growing gap in the economy is leaving most workers, especially young ones, fed up. He says companies have thrived, especially coming out of the Great Recession. Workers, however, have struggled, and he predicts a rise in union membership. Data does suggest that unions are growing, but non-union jobs are growing as well. We'll just have to wait and see over time whether or not this is a tipping point or just a blip on the radar coming out of COVID. Everything's been strange, so we just don't know.
It seems so unprecedented this year with so many different strikes.
You look back at the last 3 years and everything's been unprecedented. The question is, what parts of it stick around, what don't?
We'll have to see.
Have to just keep living. Erie News Now is election coverage you can count on, and the general election is now just under 6 weeks away. So preparations, they're already underway, including testing every voting machine here in Erie County.
Yeah, workers test the machines, and they're making sure both the firmware and the software are up to date. They also run a few ballots through the scanners to make sure they're working and reading them properly. So at the end of the day, because this takes about a day, they'll take the media card back to the Erie County Courthouse. They'll make sure that they're counted correctly there. And while this is standard procedure, all voters could see some changes at the polls this year, like polling pads being at all the precincts. Election officials say this will streamline the voting process, not only for voters, but poll workers as well. We're going to hear more about that coming up on Erie News Now at 6.
Super simple thing, and if you end up at the wrong precinct, they can tell you right where you need to go. What a game changer there. Erie News Now is investigating an ongoing problem, one that plagues neighborhoods, particularly here in Erie: rundown properties, blight. 252 blighted properties are on the city's list, and the city actually estimates there's hundreds more that just haven't made it yet.
This is a story our Jamison Hixenbaugh has been spending months on. He wanted to know what is being done to address this issue. So he's going to have part 2 of his special report, Erie's Eyesores, coming up at 6. He's looking for answers. He talks with 2 developers who own multiple properties on Erie's blight list. We're going to hear from Donald Crenshaw, who has 4 blighted properties in the city, and Apartment Association President Brandon Penn as well, who is responsible for 2 properties on that blight list. Turning our attention right now to a NASA astronaut and 2 Russian cosmonauts returning to Earth today after a longer than expected space mission.
As long as you get home safely. Frank Rubio and his Russian counterparts launched to the International Space Station last September. It was supposed to be a standard 6-month stint, but their capsule sprung a leak in December, so they couldn't come back. The crew ended up spending 371 days, a little over a year, in low orbit until a replacement capsule and crew arrived. Then they were able to come home. This breaks the previous American record for the longest space flight that had been held by another NASA astronaut. Not the way you want to break that record, but back home safely, and that is what mattered.